Welcome everybody, I'm Chris Pender, President CEO of FamCom Inc. And we're here for another parenting moment. Gear up in the Lincoln Center. Today we're going to talk about understanding your feelings and why it's important. And you can see below it says how I feel impacts how I react. As we get into this, I want everybody to take a second and think about when you've had some really emotional moments and maybe you've done a couple things that you wish you hadn't done. You said some things you wish you wouldn't have said. You responded right away and then you kind of regretted it later. That's because we don't understand our feelings. Also, if you think about it, one of the number one reasons why people get into arguments and it's hard for them to kind of make up is because we don't understand feelings. I'll give you the perfect example. My wife and I might have a discussion and she may be really frustrated. To me, that may be really silly. But if I'm not understanding her feelings, I may say something like, well, that's stupid. Why do you feel like that? Who feels like that? Understanding her feelings, you know what? I may not agree, but understand that's how she feels and she's entitled to feel it. So we can talk about this three ways. One, in your relationship, one with your children, which is really, really important, and one about yourself. Because believe it or not, emotions get people in trouble more than you think. There's a lot of people in jail right now because of emotions. There's a lot of people who do things they can't take back. And I always say, you can apologize for everything, but you can't take it back. One of my favorite examples is, I can give Rosie a dozen roses, and she may laugh and smile and think it's great. But if I take them same roses and start hitting her with it, same roses, different presentation. When we understand our feelings, we can control our presentation of the things we do and the things we say. So as we go through this, just take a second and think about it. Feelings are like a roller coaster. There will be steep hills and sharp drops. However, eventually there will be a solid ground, and feelings are. Sometimes you get really excited about stuff, and then it kind of wears off. Sometimes you get really disappointed about stuff, and hopefully it wears off. I think most of our problem is, I take it back, I know we try to stay the same way all the time. When I hear somebody say, I never get too high, I never get too low, it's great to say because I used to say it, but that's not true. As human beings, there's always something we get excited about, and there's always something that kind of makes us uncomfortable. So the key to understanding your feelings is one, and we're going to talk about, is understanding what the triggers are, what makes you feel a certain way, what makes you angry, what makes you frustrated, what makes you happy. Two, understand the warning signs when those feelings are triggered, so you can cut it off. So you can make sure that you control your emotions and not allow your emotions to control you. Most people have learned at this point in life that there are two types of feelings. Positive, feel good, smile, warm, fuzzy, a sense of self-worth. We all like those feelings. It could be a feeling of being in love. You just hit the lottery. You just got a new job. You just got married. They're good feelings. Most of the time, we don't even think about those feelings. We just enjoy the moment, unless you're a worrier. And then there's negative feelings: frown, chilly, cold, sense of doubt, low self-esteem. Negative feelings could be, we'll talk about it later, maybe you stomped your toe. It doesn't feel good, drags you down. Maybe you went to the movie, this real tearjerker you saw, and it made you cry, and it produced negative feelings. The thing about negative feelings too that we have to remember is they can also be tied to memories. I think that's where a lot of us get in trouble. And we're gonna talk about it. What I mean is, if Rosie and I got into an argument 15 years ago, and it was devastating to our relationship. I haven't seen Rosie in 15 years. I see Rosie again 15 years later, we're talking, she says something that triggers those feelings that I never addressed. So now my emotions, something happened 15 years ago. 15 years ago is triggering my emotions. So it's important that we understand the power of our emotions, good and bad, or negative and positive. And we talk about often the way we feel translates to the way we act, respond, or go about our days, and it does. I've come across people and you say, how you doing? Not too well. I could pretty much tell the days are not going too well after that because you said it. You're down. Have you ever woke up in the morning just feeling down, depressed, and your feelings, it feels like this rain is not really raining? It controls the rest of your day unless you do something about it. Now I give you an example. You can't get up feeling down and depressed and then turn the news on. That's only adding to your frustration and your grief or whatever. You got to do positive things to offset the negative feelings. So we got to make sure we're aware, though, that we're aware how it does translate. Most of us, when we get frustrated, we have a tendency to raise our voice. We have a tendency to be a little more aggressive, or adversely, we shut down. And first way in relationships is not good, because you're in a relationship, you can't just shut down because that solves nothing. It just kind of delays the inevitable. It still has to be dealt with. As a parent talking to your kids, you have to be careful because you don't want to say things that can damage your kid, calling them stupid, dumb, fat. We call kids names in a moment because we can't control our emotions and think it's no big deal. But then we wonder why later in life, we have some of the most beautiful people in the world with low self-esteem because they've been called names so long by people they really care about and that really care about them, and the respect level, it kind of hits home. And the sad part about it, some people never escape that shadow, what somebody calls at an early age. Whoever controls your emotions and feelings will ultimately control you. This is one of my favorite sayings because most people don't understand that's a fact of life. If somebody knows all they gotta do is talk about my mama and I get upset, I get off my game, once they figure it out, that's what they do. If somebody knows that if they can just do something to make me sad and I would give them whatever they want, they start pushing the buttons. Kids are really good at that. Kids can understand what I need to say to mom or dad to get this. Too often not, we don't understand the power that we give people about our emotions. I'll give you another example. I work with somebody who maybe every time I'm around them, they get on my nerves. Every time I see them, that person has power over me now because every time I see them, I'm getting depressed. I just give that person power. Or I'm not working to my potential because I'm trying to avoid the person. I'm trying to stay away from the person. So we give power to people, especially in relationships, that we gotta understand. And sometimes we give power to our kids, and our kids know if they cry, if I give you the sad face, the puppy dog eyes, whatever, I can get what I want. We don't understand it, but we've given power away. And once people control your emotions, they will control you. So the question is, who's controlling your feelings? I want you to think about that. Is it you or is it somebody else? There's no such thing as bad feelings. I don't like the term bad feelings because when you label something, and I'm huge on labels, everything that's maybe uncomfortable may not necessarily be bad. So as we go through this, I want to talk about that because sometimes you need to be uncomfortable so you'll make good decisions. That's not a bad thing. But often when you hear the word bad, you associate it with something not too good. So I try to stay away from the term bad. Reason being that when we categorize feelings as good or bad, we also categorize the people who have them as good or bad. And that's another thing we got to be careful of because sometimes we do label people unfairly, especially emotions. This person is that, this person is that, this person is that. No, that's not who the person is. That's what the person is going through. For instance, I'm having a bad day and somebody says, well, Chris is just angry all the time. No, I just had a bad day. Things just didn't go right for me in this moment, or maybe it's you that's making me frustrated every time I see you. That's a joke, but I'm just saying we have a tendency to label people on emotions, so I want to make sure that we do this properly and we stay away from bad. We're going to talk about comfortable and discomfort. Instead of using good or bad expressed feelings, we can group them into feelings of discomfort and comfort. The way is, we got to think about this way is the feelings we are labeling, not the experience the individual having the feeling. For instance, I'm not an angry person because I get angry. I'm not depressed because I have a bad moment. But more often than not, we label people, especially little kids. And I deal with a lot of kids now in school. They're dealing with labels because my mother said, my father said. Somebody close to them said. And even sometimes teachers who have influence, my teacher said. My teacher said, what, am I dumb? And so this kid develops these feelings because they got labeled. Or the kid is falling asleep in class and the teacher labels them lazy, not understanding that maybe I've ran the kids who work all night long helping to support the family, but they're labeled as lazy and they pass that on teacher to teacher to teacher. So the kid is fighting an uphill battle and nobody ever takes time to say, hey, what's really going on? And the same thing with feelings. That's why we have to explore and not just assume. And we have to make sure that we're willing to dig a little deeper. Feelings of comfort include love. We all talk about love. We all like the feeling of love. We like saying it. Peace, joy, contentment, happiness, and satisfaction. So I think we all agree these are great feelings of comfort. And it's important that we understand these feelings and explain these feelings to our kids. Our kids need to understand what love is. Love is not, if you do this, I'll love you. Mommy, daddy loves you if you do this. We got to make sure that peace doesn't necessarily mean everything is going to be perfect all the time, but it means it's a calmness. And we have to have a sense of expectations with our kids in our homes that it is a calmness, that we're not screaming and hollering, doing all this crazy stuff. Every time somebody does something, we're not screaming at them, because kids grow up to be adults who scream and holler, who don't recognize peace. We all know somebody who they're not happy unless they got something going. They're not happy unless they're miserable. Joy is something that you can't allow people to control. Joy is something that you can control in yourself, not allow other people to control. I choose to not allow people to drive me crazy. Doesn't mean they push the buttons a couple of times, but I choose not to be angry with something that somebody does to me at first period in class, and now fourth period I'm angry at the next teacher. I choose, to not allow people to make me miserable. That's what we're talking about joy, contentment. We got to teach our kids contentment does not mean that I think too many times we listen and we hear the word contentment and we think people settle for mediocrity or for failure. It doesn't. It just means, you know what? I know what I got to do to get out this situation. I'm not going to let this situation drive me crazy. I'm not going to let it make me depressed, make me unhappy, make me frustrated. I know I can figure this out. I just got to take a second to do it. And we all know what happiness and satisfaction. I think too many times people don't have a sense of satisfaction for themselves because they don't even know what it means. A lot of adults I work with, do you want to be happy? Yes. What makes you happy? I don't know. Are you satisfied? No. Well, what's going to make you satisfied? I don't know. Some people say money, and we all know money's not going to make you satisfied. Money just kind of creates more issues that you got to learn how to deal with. And if you're not satisfied with yourself, with who you are, and part of not being satisfied is when you can't control your emotions, you become erratic and stuff is in your head and you see yourself as different. We got to make sure we're talking about this with our kids, about what it means to be satisfied and how that does tie into their emotions. Because we see a lot of kids who are just depressed because they're not satisfied with with themselves. If somebody's a little bigger than somebody else, they're being called names. So imagine, if you will, the emotional impact this has, or the feeling, how this kills or destroys a young person's feeling about itself is they may be a little overweight. They're being teased in school about being overweight. And then as a parent, you say that to them. You need to lose some weight. You're kind of big for your age, aren't you? We say stuff that, and we think is entertaining, but it's not. We're destroying these kids' self-image in themselves, and we're really messing up their feelings. And we're giving them, what we're doing is giving them negative feelings, and we're going to look at those. Hate. We teach hate to our kids. Kids don't come out of the womb knowing what hate is. It's a learned behavior. And we manipulate our kids by certain things we say about maybe a certain group of people or even teachers. I'll deal with parents who they get in front of you and talk about the teacher with the kid right there. And they wonder why the kid is not paying attention in school or has no respect for the teacher. Hate ties you up on the inside. Hate makes you angry. It makes you frustrated. Hate is an emotion that you can never really fulfill because it just grows. The thirst and hunger just grows. Envy. We have to learn, this goes back to satisfaction. If I'm not satisfied with myself, I'm envious of Rosie or somebody else because I think, maybe I'm not good enough to have what they have. I deserve what they have. And a lot of times when I sit down with couples, that's a big discussion that you'd be surprised how many people in a relationship have envy. Because maybe you got this job and you make more money than I make now. Maybe you love your job and I hate my job. Maybe things are, she's making faces, maybe things appears to be turned out for you every day. And for me, I'm struggling. There's a lot of relationships where envy takes place. And this goes back to understanding your feelings. If you start to feel these things in these feelings, you got to start talking about them. You have to start discussing them. They don't go away because you want them to go away. And they're real feelings. And this goes back to what I said. Never get to the point where you're dismissing somebody else's feelings because you think it's not important or because you don't think what they're upset about is important. Jealousy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It speaks for itself. Jealousy is crazy because it happens almost at every level. I'll start with kids. Kids get jealous of other kids because we don't teach our kids about satisfaction. We don't talk about these things that we discuss with them about, be grateful for what you have. Understand your feelings. When you're feeling a certain way about something, talk about it. You don't have to physically act upon it. You can have conversations. We got to do that. And jealousy is dangerous because even I talked about envy in relationships. We have it. A lot of friendships break up because of jealousy. because we don't understand our feelings. It's coming on and coming on. But now, because I'm jealous, I say something to somebody that I really shouldn't have said, but the jealousy has taken over. I never address it. It comes out. I can't take it back. So I'm sorry. I'm remorseful. I'm apologizing, but this person is wounded. And again, you can apologize for everything, but we can't take stuff back. So we got to make sure we're looking at these feelings. Anger. How many people incarcerated right now because of anger? Because they got angry, they did something. How many divorces right now because of anger? Because somebody said or did something out of anger, and now they can't take it back. How many broken homes do we have out of anger? Because things happen inside a house, and people think, I can take it back. You can't. Anger is one that we have to be careful of, because every last one of us are capable of all these things if we're not careful. Every last one of us. And anger is huge, because anger is another behavior that our kids mimic. See, the thing about feelings, I think we forget sometimes, is parents, you are the role model for your kids. So they watch how you handle your frustration, how you handle your anger, how you model your love, how you model character integrity, how you control your emotions, or how you control your feelings. They learn so much from what we do, not as much as what we say. Contrary, that's why social media is so popular now, because they're putting out visuals, they're showing visual stimulating things to our kids that kids are seeing and setting an example for how they should behave or what they think is cool. TikTok is the number one. People like TikTok. Why? Because it gives you visual demonstrations of what you do, no matter how crazy it is. People get excited about the TikTok because it's visual stimulation. So we got to make sure, man, that we're leading by example. Frustration. We all get frustrated, but how do you handle your frustration? Do you shut down and stop talking? And that's an important one. This one for me is a lot of times when I'm sitting down talking to parents, and parents will say, well, my kid stopped talking to me. It's probably out of frustration, because your kid is talking to you, you cut them off in the middle of the sentence because you don't like what they're saying. Your kid is trying to say something to you because you think it's not true. You cut them off in the middle of what they're saying. This is one of my favorite stories. It's not a story, it's kind of funny. But my father used to say to me, he used to say, talk to me. And when I started talking, don't talk back to me. That was like the most confusing message I received growing up. Or, who you talking to? Look at me. Don't look at me like that. It was it's funny now as an adult, but as a kid, you're thinking like, wow. But as parents, frustration causes people to shut down. It causes people to hate, envy, to be jealous, to be angry, because when you get frustrated, your emotions are all over the place. All over the place. So we got to make sure that we understand this. And sadness, we all know what sadness is. The thing about sadness, I think sadness, I know, is more powerful than we give it credit for. People become suicidal over sadness. People get deeply depressed over sadness. People quit jobs. I always say this, as human beings, most of us are one decision away from having a different life. Just one decision from having a different life. I say, if I didn't go out the night I met my wife, I probably would have never met her. It's a different story. If you don't go to a college that you go to and meet somebody that's still your best friend, you don't meet them. One decision. Most of us are one decision away. If you were deciding on a major in school and you chose this as opposed to something else, that something else would have maybe had you in a total different life. Had you stayed in school in that area and not come back to this area, would you know the people you know? Would you be doing what you're doing? Would you be able to touch and reach the people you're doing? I think that one decision we understand is sadness impacts a lot of that. So we got to make sure. There's a college kid who just committed suicide. He was a basketball player in college. And everybody thought he had it all together because he's a basketball player, and that happens so much in this country because sadness, and the person who's going through it does not recognize what it's doing to them. They don't recognize the damage it's doing to them, to their psyche, the way it's tearing them down, and people around them are not paying attention. They're not paying attention. So we have to make sure that we do understand feelings. The goal is to manage feelings of discomfort as to not allow them to take over you. And we talked about that, and it will take over your life. How to manage your feelings. 1, awareness. We need to be aware of when we're starting to feel a certain way. We need to be aware. I know when I'm getting frustrated. Rosie's probably laughing because I do. So I know when I gotta slow down, and in my mind I'm saying, okay, I'm frustrated. This is where I gotta talk less and think more. and process more. Because I don't want to say something that's going to damage the relationship or going to put me in a bad light. So I'm aware of my feelings. I know when I get excited. I know when I get happy. I make it a point to be aware. Are you aware of your feelings? Are you aware of your triggers? Like, I know what frustrates me. People who have a total disregard for other people totally frustrate me. That's one, it just drives me crazy. And we live in a time now where that happens almost every day. You're waiting in line, somebody just walks and gets in front of you. You sitting at the light, somebody's blowing their horn, light is red as a stop sign. Somebody's just behind you, just blowing the horn, or you stop to let somebody pass and people get upset. Or I can say whatever I want to say to you, but the minute you say something back to me, you're the worst person in the world. So I'm aware of my feelings. We got to be aware of our feelings, man. The way your body responds to feelings and emotions. This is one that all too often we ignore. People have heart attacks. People have stress. People pull their hair out because they just start yanking every time something goes wrong. They're pulling. People gain weight because they eat. Because I'm getting frustrated. Stress can hurt you. Stress can cause you an ulcer. Stress can make you mentally fatigued. And the thing about mental fatigue, you can't take a nap to fix it. You can be physically fatigued and take a nap. Mental fatigue is so different. It's so hard to recover from. So we got to make sure that we are paying attention to our bodies. Awareness of feelings and emotions that generate certain triggers. We got to know that. Movies. My wife loves to go to the movies. On and off of the movies, but you go to a movie, you're sitting there watching the movie, and the movies does this very well. They'll play a certain type of music before something happens, and that music is to trigger your feelings. Like if somebody's about to die, they're not playing a song from a club. It's a little different. If you hear da da da, you waiting for something to happen. So there's triggers that we got to pay attention to. Marketing, they do it very well. We have to learn about our own triggers. For instance, if a trigger of yours is maybe somebody's disrespectful. Like I know people who just don't like disrespectful kids. Disrespectful kid, they go off. That's a trigger, and you work in the school, you got to be careful in that environment. If your trigger is people that don't agree with you. Unfortunately, some people make you the enemy if you don't agree with them, and you get upset, you get angry, you got to make sure you're monitoring yourself in those environments. If your trigger is somebody in traffic and you want to bang on the horn, you got to be careful. When that happens, maybe I got to count to 10 backwards. I tell people, before you say or do anything, 10 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, just something to slow this down because you're aware of the trigger of what's about to happen. Acceptance. Accepting your feelings are okay, and that you're not a bad person for having those feelings. This is one of the number one things that I deal with, that people have issues with their feelings. I might hear people say all the time, well, you shouldn't have got angry. Why not? It's a human emotion. Getting angry is not a bad thing. It's how you handle your anger. What do you do out of anger is where the issue comes in. I hear people say, well, she should have never fell in love with him. Well, that's something you can't control. Now how do you deal with it? So feelings, we got to make sure, man, that we have to accept the feelings. The other thing about accepting your feelings, if you don't accept them, you can't deal with them. If I don't accept that I got an anger problem, I'm never going to deal with it. If I don't accept that I got short patience and I can't deal with certain things, I'm never going to do anything to correct it. So we got to make sure that we accept our feelings. And communication. It can be verbal or nonverbal. I move my hands a lot. But I've been around people who you can look at their face, right? And you can tell what they feel. Their mouth might be saying, yeah, but their face is like, they don't say really out loud, but they look at you like, really? Verbal communication is huge, especially when parents are talking to kids, and I'll start there. One of the things I like to do when I do in-person parenting classes, I'll have a parent, I'll get the tallest person in the room stand on a chair. And then I'll get somebody short to get on their knees. And I'll have that person raise their voice. It's a big difference when somebody's here and when somebody's way over here howling. It's a big difference, so it does matter. If I'm talking to you and I'm holding my hands out like this, that's one thing. But if I'm talking to you and I'm like clenched like this, it matters. You know, I talked about the roses. If I walk up with the nice roses and I say, here you go, here's a dozen roses, everybody smiles. If I walk up with and I'm swinging them as I'm walking up to you, it's different. So body language is huge. And I hear this a lot of time, especially when I'm talking to couples. Well, I never really said that. Yeah, but sometimes what we don't say is just as powerful. For instance, if I walk up to you and says, I love you with all my heart, and you just look at me, you didn't say anything, but I'm crushed because I'm waiting for the response. You know, I want to respond. So it was nonverbal, but it hurt just as bad. That's just as bad if you say, well, I don't love you. It's the same thing. You know, so a lot of times we think nonverbal is a good thing. It's not. Be mindful that all feelings have energy and gives feeling to life, and it does. And I think that's what we got to understand. Feelings have energy. When you're happy, you kind of, you got the pep in your step, man. Everybody's going well. People can tell you're happy. When you're frustrated, you put off a negative energy. If you're frustrated, they're not going to invite you to the office party. Say, yo, we want you to come out and, if you're happy, yeah, you want to get invited. So it does have energy. Here's 3 helpful rules in expressing your energy. 1, respect yourself and don't hurt yourself. And I know right now the suicide rate is up and a lot of people are not really paying attention to how they feel. Maybe COVID impacted you worse than you thought it did and you're not making, preparations, you're not addressing it. Maybe something in your life is just not going well. You don't have an opportunity to talk about it. You don't feel comfortable sharing it. Respect yourself. You always should respect yourself and love yourself enough to treat yourself the very best way you can. That's important, man. And you should never consider hurting yourself. Hurting yourself is not going to hurt anybody else as much as it's going to hurt you. And you need to think about that. I know sometimes we get depressed or we get sad, we want to hurt ourselves too. Respect others and don't hurt others. That's important, man, that we don't hit people. We don't lash out of anger. We don't do things to purposely hurt people. This goes back to what I said. You can't take things back. You can apologize. A lot of married couples are struggling right now because he or she said something and they can't take it back. A lot of fathers and sons or fathers, daughters, mother, sons, mother, daughters are struggling right now because somebody said something to them and you can't take it back because it's out there and you really wounded somebody. So we got to be careful, respect others and don't hurt them. Respect the environment, don't destroy property, animals, and nature. I used to work with a guy who I was helping him through some anger problems, and he used to break TVs. Every time he got mad, he would do something, break the TV. Yeah, that look, I can just buy another TV set. So I said, let me ask you a question. How many TVs have you bought in the last year? And he stopped and he thought about it. He bought 6. I said, you bought 6 TVs, dude? I said, think about what that cost. Multiply it over the next 10 years. And then he just looked at me. See, a lot of times we do stuff and we think in that moment it's not that big a deal, but it is a big deal. Domestic violence starts right here because I'm angry, I'm going to hit somebody else. Child abuse starts because I'm frustrated, I'm going to take it out on my child. This right here is key, man. And even in environment, man, and this is, don't think of it as just the trees and stuff. Your environment, I need to respect you guys enough not to act a certain way in front of you. I respect you guys enough to no matter what happened to me before I walk in here to do this video, that I'm not in here cursing, going crazy, that's about respecting your environment. It's not just the trees and the skies, it's where you at, it's all around you. It's your community, it's your home, where your kids live, where your husband, your wife, or your significant other lives. That's your environment. When you're in school, that's your environment. At work, that's your environment. Make sure you have enough respect for yourself and others in your environment, man, that you can maintain a sense of integrity and character. Hiding your feelings. When you shoot through this quickly, based on past experience, you may avoid dealing with our emotions to avoid pain. We talked about that. Loss of loved ones. Some people, they never mourn. They just carry it around inside. And years later, they're still dealing with the struggle, and they realize I can't seem to be happy. I can't seem to enjoy myself for a long period of time, man. The end of a meaningful relationship. Breakups are hard, but the tendency in breakups is to say, I don't care. I'm better off without them. But if you really care about somebody, you had a meaningful relationship, regardless of what happened, a part of you is still in that relationship. Finances are huge, man. People like to know that they can pay their bills and they can eat and do the essential things in life. And that can be devastating to a lot of people, man. That uncertainty comes along that, I can't pay my bills on time. Will I be able to pay my bills? Will I be able to feed my kids? Will I be able to do the things I need to do? Will I be able to pay my health insurance? All that stuff generates feelings, and it's not a macho thing to walk around like, oh, I'm fine. The suicide rate is up in every ethnic group. It is crazy how the suicide rate is rising, and it's rising because most of us, we go through these things and we try to hide our feelings. We don't say how we really feel. We may try to forget past experiences altogether. We do. I've sat down with couples and something comes up that something happened to her or him when they were a child that they never shared with each other. Now it's coming out in their relationship. So we got to make sure, man. We may indulge in healthy behaviors. People smoke, they get high, they drink, and that's only a temporary fix. And typically people who become addicts or junkies or, who have to go into rehab what started out as an escape got them addiction. It became an addiction. We learn early in life how not to deal with past hurtful experiences. We do. And we just learn, I'm just going to ignore it. What you did, I know it hurts, I'm going to ignore it. But you know what? I'm going to take it out on her. I'm dating her now, and this is over. And I can see this coming again, but that's what happens. You don't even realize it. Oh, somebody did this to me. She's about to do the same thing, so I take it out on her. How many times you talk to somebody and something happened, they bring up somebody else from the past. The two famous words is what? Remember when? Those words more often than not lead to something negative. It does in a relationship. Oh, remember when? So we have to make sure, man, that we express in our emotions, we identify our emotions, and we know how to deal with our emotions. And part of what we talked about is just letting go of past pains. And I went too fast as always. Unpleasant experience, you're unable or willing to let go can become anchors that weigh us down in life. And that's trauma. And trauma is real. A lot of our kids deal with trauma because things that happened when they were younger, they saw, and parent was like, he'll get over it, she'll get over it, and they haven't. So what happens is a lot of us get married with the same baggage. We carry that baggage into our relationships. We must be purposeful about identifying the anchor and setting ourselves free. We should always do, as part of understanding your feelings, you should always do a self-assessment. I recommend that everybody do it. I do it 3 times a year. I sit down and, I list my goals and stuff, but also, I look at our chart. Oh man, this didn't go well for me. How did I react? That wasn't a good way to react. The way I reacted, did it make things worse? Did it make things better? You got to assess those things, man, and you got to be purposeful about changing them. They're not going to change because you wake up one day and say, I want to change. You have to make an active choice, be purposeful about changing them. We got to let go. I tell people all the time, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. When you forgive somebody, you let go. When you don't forgive somebody, 9 out of 10 times the other person is living their life. They could care less. You're walking around hurt, wounded, mad at the world, and every time the person's name come up, you just get unhappy, you get frustrated. You gotta let it go. Now, I didn't say let it happen to you again. What I'm saying is we have to learn to forgive and move on so we can get rid of some of those feelings. We must not relive past experiences. I hear people says, well, I'm going to forgive, but I'm not going to forget. If you're not forgetting, you're reliving your past experiences. You can learn from them, but if you're not forgetting, you're reliving them. And if you like me or the average human, every time you relive something, it feels the same way. Look at it this way. You went to your grandma's house or somebody's house and they baked or they cooked and it was a certain aroma that was in the house. You could be walking in the mall and you smell it. What do you think about? Grandma. If dad wore a certain cologne or mom wore a certain perfume, you think about it. So you can't say I'm going to forgive, I'm not going to forget, because you don't forget, you relive it. We must focus on how we can be better and the best version of ourselves. And that's what this is all about. This is not about you competing against anybody else. This isn't about you putting yourself up, comparing yourself to somebody else. It's how can you be the best version of you? That's what this is all about. How can you become the best version of you? Not trying to please somebody else, not trying to make everybody else happy. How can you be the best version of you? How do our young scholars handle their feelings? How do our kids handle their feelings? We talked about this. We lead by example. One of the things we got to understand, I'm not going to read it verbatim, is how we teach our kids how to handle their feelings ultimately will impact their future. I see it in classes now because some kids get angry, and they throw stuff because they're allowed to do it at home. They're 14 years old throwing a 2-year-old temper tantrum because we never corrected them how they express their emotions. There are some kids who are just so timid, because, we don't want them to be confrontational. And all confrontation is not bad. We'll talk about that later. So we teach them to back down. So they walk around with their head down. They walk around, it's better to be seen and not heard. So they don't say the things they don't speak up for themselves. We teach them all this stuff when they're young. One of my least favorite ones, what do we tell our boys? Don't cry. Men don't cry. But they do. We say, so you get all these men walk around with pent up emotion, who really believe I'm less of a man if I cry. One of the biggest mistakes parents can make is not to teach their children how to manage their feelings and emotions. And that's true. I think at a young age, we should teach our kids to be accountable for their emotions. If your child picks up a brick and throws it through the window because they're upset, that's not the time to just say, oh, he's going to grow out of it. You need to have a discussion with him. It's important to control your emotions. If you have a child that hits a lot, he hits people all the time. That needs to be addressed at a young age, because when he goes to school, he's going to hit people. Unfortunately, sometimes when he grows up, he's going to hit people. I taught my boys at an early age, you don't hit women. That was no, you don't hit women. Because I didn't want them growing up thinking it was okay to hit women. We got to make sure, man, we teach them how to control their emotions. Yeah, when you're happy, you can be happy, but you can't be crazy. Yeah, you can enjoy life, but you have to do it with some boundaries. You have to teach our kids, man, or we just got finished talking about it. You teach our boys it's okay to cry. It's okay to admit that you're in pain. One of the things I deal with a lot is in a relationship is she'll say, I love you, and he'll say, me too. He can't say it. She's laughing, but it's true. I love you. And he just can't say it because he's been taught it's a weakness. That's a feeling you can't show. You can't show that emotion. So now, she's trying to love him and he's like, get off me. But it is, or vice versa. I'm a very touchy-feely person, so that's how I am. I know people who are not. If I know you, I'll hug you. There's some people like, yo, get off me. And they don't think it's ill intent. They just like, she's laughing, must be her. No, but it's because if that's your norm, we talked about norms, if that's the way you raised, that's your reality. And you typically get that from a parent. Because of a parent. I'll flip it around. One of the things I dislike wholeheartedly is when I'm in a supermarket or store and there's a kid and the kid starts crying when a stranger walks up. And the parent turns around and says, what are you crying for? Stop crying. That person's not going to hurt you. That is a mechanism that kids have. Stranger danger. And how many times do we take it away from them? Because we don't want them to show that emotion. So we tell this kid, so when a complete stranger walks up to you, the kid's just standing there now. Because you can't cry. You don't show the emotion. And that's why so many of our kids get snatched now. Because we've taken that emotion away from them. The whole Me Too movement, same thing. You can't go to somebody and say, hey, this is what happened, this is the way I'm feeling, because, oh, it must have been your fault. So you're telling this person, you can't show this emotion because if you show this emotion, you're going to be branded. This is what we're going to make you feel. And it works because how many people get intimidated and they just become victims their whole lives. So we think it's not a big deal when we don't teach people how to express themselves and give them the space to do it. It's okay if you come to me crying and say that you think something is unfair. It's okay if you come to me and says, life just sucks right now. Not stop whining. What are you complaining about? And as parents, we do it a lot. What are you complaining about? You got a roof over your head. What are you complaining about? You got food. We say stuff like that is the beginning and the end of life, and it's not. So we got to make sure, man, that we teaching our kids how to handle their emotions, but you got to make sure you can handle your emotions. Emotional competence, the ability to express your feelings, emotions in appropriate ways. And there's appropriate ways. I can be angry and frustrated and say, Rosie, I'm really upset. I don't like the way that happened. Hey, how can we go work this together? Well, I can just start screaming and cursing. My kid comes in the house, say, Chris, you could have did better in school today. What happened? Versus, oh, you always doing something, how can we express it? I'm throwing stuff at my kid because my kid did something wrong. Just look at Major League Sports. Look at Major League Sports. You got grown men making all this money and they act like they're playing Sandlot. And the very things that they tell these kids don't do, they're doing in professional sports. Because, hey, they don't know how to express their feelings in an appropriate way. So I think it's important that we make sure we teach them. And we're closing. Ways to build emotional competence. Oh, I went too fast again. Understand the feelings are okay. We talked about that. Label the feeling, emotion you see or think you see. We talked about that. If I'm angry, call it angry. If I'm frustrated, call it frustrated. Learn how to express emotional energy. We got to make sure we're teaching that. And I give you a tip. Even in relationships, you have to create a space where you can be honest with each other about how you feel. We got rules now. You just can't call me a bunch of names and say, you shouldn't say you make me feel, because I think you give power to the person and there's a blame game. What you can say is, this is how I feel when you do this. This is how I feel when you do this. Not you make me feel, because that's kind of getting the blame game. But we got to make sure we create that space. And it's the same thing with our kids as we close. We have to give our kids space where they can come and share with us, where they can say, hey, mommy or daddy, this is how I feel. Mommy or daddy, this is how you make me feel when you raise your voice at me. We got to teach them that's okay. I heard somebody say this yesterday, and it kind of, in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, what? Not yesterday, Sunday. I was at the Eagles practice Sunday, and it's sitting behind me, and a little boy was asking his mom a bunch of questions. And she started out real calm. He was like, Mommy, why are they running around, jumping around like that? She says, they're really excited because of football. She said, Mommy, but they're grown men, Yeah, he was explaining to him. And then he said, well, Mommy, can you tell me? And then she says, well, why am I explaining this stuff to you? She said, just because I said so. And I'm thinking to myself like, wow. And it was an innocent conversation, but that's how she ended the conversation. How many times have you ended a conversation like that? Is that creating a space for your kids or for your significant other or anybody to share? So that's my presentation today, Understanding Your Feelings. Chris Pender, FamCom Inc. Thank you very much.